Okay. As long as everyone's ready, we're just going to go ahead and get started. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Operations. It is Monday, August 9, 2021, and we are here today for a virtual hearing on docket 0834, order for a hearing regarding the creation of Boston-Cambridge Tourism Marketing District pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40X. This hearing is a joint hearing between the Government Operations Committee and the Committee on Arts, Culture, and Special Events, chaired by Councilor Frank Baker. This matter was sponsored by myself and Councilor Baker and referred to this committee on June 30th, 2021. And according with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom, and it is being recorded. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health accommodations. The public may watch this hearing via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council and on Xfinity 8 RCN 82 Verizon 964. It will be later broadcasted rebroadcasted later at another date. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. The purpose of this hearing is to authorize the creation of a Boston-Cambridge Tourism Destination Marketing District Plan, or TDMD. Pursuant to Chapter 40X of the Massachusetts General Laws, the TDMD plan establishes the services, programs, budget, assessment structure, criteria for businesses management, and the committee for the TDMD area. The approval of the City Council is required as part of the creation of a TDMD. The TDMD will permit hotels in Boston and Cambridge to implement an assessment that will be directly reinvested back into the TDMD. We are joined today by several of my colleagues, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Flaherty, Councillor Kenzie Bach, and of course the co-sponsor, Councillor Baker. Also joining us today, and who will be speaking, is Kate Davis, or available for questions, I should say. Kate Davis, Director of the Mayor's Office of Tourism, Sports and Entertainment. And the committee will be joined by the following individuals: Martha Sheridan, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau; Dan Donahue, President of Saunders Hotel Group; Gurki Singh, General Manager of the W Hotel, Weston Copley; Susan Taylor, Executive Director of Freedom Trail Foundation; and Kathryn Peterson, Executive Director of Arts Boston. I am going to turn it over to some of my colleagues for some very brief opening remarks, and then we're going to go directly into our panel to describe what is before us and what ultimately is the process that we must comply with in order to make this TDMD possible. I just want to say outright at the very beginning, we are thankful to the State House for allowing for this local option, which is what we are looking at today. I believe it was passed in last year's budget by Chairman Michaelowicz. And what this would do, again, is similar to our business improvement district. It's a way for local investors or local businesses to be able to pull money based on a fee that they assess, and based on them assuring that their investment and their locations will be vibrant, will be community oriented, and will be supportive of jobs. Here in Boston, we have lacked a full-on line item, clear dedication amount of funds for tourism. And what we saw in the pandemic is that if you don't have that and you don't have the rainy day fund, the industry suffered immensely. So we want to make sure that and it's great that the industry is leading in making sure that we come up with this, I think, sustainable, economically viable solution to make sure that no matter what happens, we can be pandemic proof, we can be, weatherproof, whatever it does that impacts the tourism industry. We want to make sure that we are going to grow and be vibrant, responsive to community, green in our response, and also create jobs. So we're going to go through all of that shortly. But to my colleagues, I think in order of arrival, Councillor Flynn and Councillor Baker, Flynn, Flaherty, and Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. Very supportive of this idea. I'm actually working on a bid down in Mass and Cass that'll be structured far different. But the intent of this application here couldn't be any more timely, I think. And I'm here just along for the ride to see what the details will be. And again, very supportive, and thank you for your leadership on this, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards and Councilor Baker as well. Appreciate your leadership on this important issue. I also know the incredible role tourism plays in our economy, especially over the last 2 years. We have seen a drastic decrease in the hotel rooms that play a critical role in Boston's economy, welcoming so many visitors. Many of them are in my district, and many of the people that work in the hotels are also in my district. I see them every day in South Boston, in Chinatown or the South End. Many of them live in Dorchester as well, and in Mattapan. But the hotels play a critical role in Boston's economy, and the workers do as well. The workers receive a good salary. They have good training. It's a pathway to the middle class. So I'm going to do everything I can to get people back to Boston, to visit this great city, to frequent our bars and restaurants and stay in our hotels, because that's what Boston's proud of, is being welcoming to visitors that want to see the great history of this city. So I just want to acknowledge the role of Councilor Edwards, Councilor Baker, city officials, and also the hotel executives that are on this call as well. Thank you for the important work you're doing.
Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you and Councilor Baker for co-sponsoring and for calling for today's important hearing. As mentioned, Boston's tourism sector was one of the hardest industries hit by COVID-19, and the tourism industry employs thousands of hardworking Bostonians who live in all the neighborhoods of our city. And they're in well-paying jobs, as Councilor Flynn just alluded to, many of them obviously union jobs, and they serve as an economic engine for the city and the region. We know and we can boast that Boston is a top-class tourism destination with all of our historic sites, beautiful scenery, thriving restaurants, the college and university. And yes, unlike a lot of cities our size or bigger, Boston is a safe city. I fully support the creation of Boston Cambridge Tourism Marketing District to serve as a necessary shot in the arm to restore the region's tourism statistics back to where they were prior to the pandemic, and also at one of the top nationally. So I look forward to learning more about what we can do to ensure this endeavor is a successful one, and this partnership with Cambridge hopefully will help not only thousands of Bostonians who work in that sector, but will also help lift up folks that in the same industries in Cambridge. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my colleagues have already said much of what I would say. Just, as the councilor representing, the West End, Beacon Hill, Back Bay portion of my district, pieces of that are in this proposal. And I just think that it is so important to remember that our tourism industry, even when it's concentrated downtown, the tendrils of its impact reach all the way across the city. And like Councilor Flaherty said, I've got constituents in Mission Hill who work at the hotels downtown, and I think that the whole city's connected, and we've all really taken a hit. The whole business area has taken a huge hit during COVID, and I think that cities all over the country are struggling with that. But I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that Boston comes back, faster and stronger and better. And anything we can do to kind of pull together. If there's one thing we've seen in COVID-19, it's been the power of collective action. And also, the real risks when you don't pull together. So I think, hopefully this is something where we can all swim in the same direction and set ourselves up for, a lot of strength in the recovery as a tourism destination. So very supportive of the effort and pleased to be here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I'm now going to turn it over to Martha Sheridan. To go ahead and kick us off. I think you have a deck and some background, and then we'll go from Martha to if Dan wants to speak, and then Gerke, then Suzanne, and then Kathryn Peterson. And then we'll probably then allow for the counselors to do a whole round of questions to all of you. And then we will go on. But before I go, I wanted to recognize that we have letters of support from the city of Cambridge itself, from the Cambridge Office of Tourism, from Yotel, and from Duck Tours. We have not to date received any letters of opposition to this, and I wanted to put that on record. So go ahead, Martha.
Great, thank you, Councilor Edwards and Councilor Baker and all of the other city councilors on the call. Thank you for having us today. I want to start by thanking Councilor Edwards and Councilor Baker for understanding the need for this effort. By way of background, we began the process of forming this district about 2 years ago. And as Councilor Edwards noted, we were successful in passing legislation this past January with the help of, and actually the strong support of Chairman Micklewitz and Leader Moran, who were big advocates for this. That legislation, which I'll talk about shortly, enabled us to decide amongst the 45 cities and towns in the official promotion district of the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau, which cities we would include. And given that most of our hotel product is in Boston and Cambridge, we were thrilled to be able to partner with the city of Cambridge on this. As Councilor Edwards noted, they have been very, very strong supporters and have voted to authorize the Boston City Council to act on their behalf in the formation of this district. Okay, next slide. So pre-pandemic, tourism was the third largest industry in Massachusetts, obviously a vital economic driver for both the cities of Boston and the cities of Cambridge. The economic output in the greater Boston area, which is up from Quincy up to Everett and out to 128, was $22.6 billion. Total state and local tax revenue generated by the industry, $850 million, and that's untethered tax revenue that goes into the general funds of the Commonwealth and every city and town in the region. Occupancy tax revenue for the greater Boston region was $318 million. And in the greater Boston region, tourism supported 140,000 jobs. So we were on a roll, but we still recognize the need for this effort because the industry was growing, competition was getting very strong. We were adding much more hotel product, and we knew that we needed the funds to remain competitive in a very, very competitive marketplace. So that was then, and this is now. Councillor Flynn alluded to hotel numbers, and here is the good, the bad, and the ugly. In 2019, we had a great year. We ran 82.5% occupancy with an average daily rate of $261 for a collective RevPAR, which is revenue per available room, of $215 per night. In 2020, when the world changed for all of us, our occupancy rate dropped to 25.7. It would have been much lower had January and February not been had not remained open, but we managed to squeak out 25.7, which obviously is a huge drop from the previous year. Rate dropped to 160, and RevPAR dropped to $41.08. And then year to date in 21, we're only back to 29.2% occupancy, $162 average daily rate, and a RevPAR of 47.37. What does this equate to? It equates to the fact that the hotels are bleeding money versus 2019. We do not have our full complement of visitors on the horizon to come back for several years to come. So we don't expect that this trajectory will be fast, but we do need these funds to help at least jumpstart us towards recovery. From an occupancy perspective, we're projecting that we'll end this year at 41%, and that will end 2022 at 66%. If you compare 2022 to 2019, that's at only 72% of that robust year. Why is this important? Many of you alluded to it. It's all about our workforce. Our associates are what make the tourism industry in Boston, in Cambridge, in Massachusetts so successful. Pre-pandemic in Massachusetts, 1 of every 10 residents was employed in the hospitality and tourism industry. We provide flexible and accommodating employment opportunities. It is one of the most diverse workforces of any workforce in the Commonwealth. And in 2020, you will see we lost 43% of those jobs in Massachusetts. So many of our valued employees are not back to work yet. And I know that my hotel counterparts that will be following will talk about that. So with lodging tax revenue, I alluded to earlier, is typically a source of revenue for tourism promotion in much states. The following slide will show you what our budget looks like at the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau compared to our competitive set. It is not a pretty picture, but I did want to show you how much revenue is collected from the hotel community across the Commonwealth related to hotel occupancy tax. It's $513 million a year pre-pandemic. It's a huge sum. It's dropped significantly. Of that $513 million, as I mentioned earlier, $400 million goes into the Mass and Boston General Fund for unrestricted use. $103 million goes to the Mass Convention Center Fund. $4 million goes to the Mass Office of Tourism. $3.9 million goes to all of my counterparts across the state. There are 16 regional tourism councils, and the GBCVB pre-pandemic received only $2.1 million of that 513 million collected. So here's what we look like against other cities that we compete with in the global tourism marketplace. These are the cities in the US, primarily East Coast cities, that we will see our city bidding against for large conventions, for large scale events, for leisure visitors, et cetera. These are pre-pandemic numbers. Most of these CVBs are funded by hotel tax and or a combination hotel tax and a tourism improvement district assessment, similar to what we are seeking to do today. As you can see, our budget pre-pandemic was a total of $7.4 million, most of that coming from the private sector. And now we are down to $4 million. Clearly, it's going to make it very difficult for us to regain our market share at that level. So what do we risk if we stay the current course and we don't invest in tourism promotion? Competition is going to be fierce. Every one of my friends in this industry across the country are going after the same visitors, and we're going after a smaller pool of visitors. Our inventory, our hotel inventory, is increasing in spite of the fact that the pandemic occurred. Construction did not stop. In 2021, we'll see 6.4% more hotel rooms, which is part of a 20% increase over a 5-year period. Those rooms will not sell themselves. And industry experts are forecasting not a 1 or 2 year recovery, not a 2 or 3 year recovery, 4 to 5 years. Investment is key for us to stay competitive within that 5-year window. So we must really activate now as partners with the city of Cambridge to engage all audiences and bring tourism back to its previous state. So what is it that we're asking you to do? Councilor Edwards alluded to the other bids in the Boston market, the downtown Boston bid, which you're familiar with, as well as the Rose Kennedy Greenway. They are formed in a similar way, with the exception of the fact that this is not the geographic area for us. Are 2 complete cities, the cities of Boston and Cambridge, and we are only assessing one type of business within our geographic area, and that is the hotel community. So a TDMD allows hotels in a defined area to self-assess and collect monies that go into a fund, which will be managed by a governance board and deployed by a designated destination marketing organization. And that's the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau. This is not a new concept. There are 183 of them across the US with an ROI ranging from $3 to $1 spent to $25 to $1 spent. We mentioned the enabling legislation. Councilor Edwards referred to it as well. First of all, this will not allow the Commonwealth to replace our existing funding. It'll only supplement the existing funding that we get from the Tourism Trust Fund. We have encompassed 2 jurisdictions, Boston and Cambridge. We have a written TDMD plan, which was included in your docket documents. You've hopefully already been able to review that. And TDMDs are governed by a committee of an RTC, which is us. And the governance committee of the TDMD must be comprised of lodging business owners that pay the TDMD assessment. It can be renewed every 5 years. The revenues in this case will be collected by the Commissioner of Revenue, who also collects the hotel tax. So it'll make it easier for the hotels. It's dispersed quarterly to our organization. We will operate with utmost transparency in mind, with an annual audit conducted and filed annually. And it may be disestablished by a majority of petition businesses subject to the TDMD at any time. So specifically, the TDMD that we're proposing is that hotels have voted to create this TDMD and govern how the funds are deployed. We were required by statute to reach a 62% petition rate. Typically across the country, the petition rate is only 51%. Ours was a bit higher due to unforeseen circumstances in the Commonwealth, but we were able to achieve a 70% petition rate, meaning 70% of all hotels with over 50 rooms in Boston and Cambridge agreed to be assessed. And that's not to say that 30% did not agree. It's just that we weren't necessarily able to track them down, even though we have given ample public notice. We are proposing a 15-member governance board, and the assessment will be 1.5% on the checkout rate. So what will we do with the funds? We will increase brand awareness of Boston. We will deploy a strategic communications program, enhance our meeting and convention sales. This is key right now. One of the key markets that we have not been able to recover are meetings and conventions. The key subset of employees in our hotels right now are those that work in banquet kitchens and as banquet servers, one of the highest paying jobs in our industry. And as our hoteliers will attest to, they've not been able to bring them back. We will continue to deploy robust leisure and consumer campaigns, just as we did with the All-Inclusive Boston campaign. We will strive to bring back our international visitors, which make up a significant percentage of visitors to Boston. We will support special events and also support communities across Boston through an application process with some of these funds. We are committed to workforce development, to developing and training a more diverse workforce towards the management ranks, and also committing to supplier diversity. We will do this, as Councilor Edwards mentioned, with sustainability in mind, focusing on ecotourism where appropriate, and of course, developing multilingual assets and accessibility. I do want to highlight that our agency with our limited funds has already committed to not just promoting the Central Core, as many people think the Boston Tourism Center is. We have already committed to promoting many neighborhoods in Boston. We've developed and deployed 3 videos, Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, and Dorchester. Our Dorchester video will be deployed this week, actually. If we had more funds, this would be a much faster path, quite frankly. And we'd be able to get to all the neighborhoods much quicker, but we have to, we just have to do this at a slower pace because we don't have funds readily available to us every year. And most importantly for you all, how will Boston and Cambridge benefit from this effort? It will bolster visitation and hotel occupancy. It'll restore leisure, hospitality, and hotel jobs. It'll enhance neighborhood experiences. It will increase single property meeting sales and related spending. It will allow for that incentive and special projects fund that I referenced in the previous slide. It'll reignite international visitation. And of course, it'll resuscitate hotel tax revenue for the Boston, Cambridge, and Mass General Fund. That's where that ROI will come in for the city of Boston and Cambridge specifically. You're all familiar with the campaign that we worked on collectively with Colette Phillips Communications and Proverb, the All-Inclusive Boston campaign that was funded through CARES Act monies from Mayor Walsh and then subsequently supported by now Mayor Janey. It was a very successful campaign aimed at diversifying the businesses that we're promoting, but also diversifying our visitors. And we do have testimony from this lovely couple on the right who owns Urban Grape, pointing to the fact that they have seen a significant increase in business since they've been featured in that campaign. And our agency already is committed to sponsoring a diverse array of events in the community, and this list will only grow with further investment from the TDMD. So that is my presentation. Sorry if it was lengthy, that's a lot to cover. And I will turn it back to you, Councillor Edwards, unless you would like me to introduce my fellow panelists.
Well, you're free. I mean, I have them in order, but go ahead. And if folks are going to speak, go ahead, Martha.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to introduce the chair of the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau and one of the most well-known hoteliers in the city of Boston, a great community supporter, Mr. Dan Donahue. Dan?
Thank you, Martha. Oh, did I stop the video? How long we've been doing Zoom, I still can't get it. Councillor Edwards and Councillor Baker, thank you for your leadership of bringing this to the light to your fellow councillors. And in a time, you know, certainly for the past 12 years that I've been involved with the Bureau, we have had challenges. You know, our industry, you know, typically if you go past the, you know, the recession of 2008 and 2009, and we started to recover, you know, our industry was what some would consider, especially on the Hill, you know, an industry that is fat and happy. And I'm here to tell you that while that is true, you know, that delusion is gone, and the pandemic has taken that from us in a very significant way. You know, you only need to watch you know, late night TV or any of the morning shows to see our competition, the people that we're up against every single day to attract them to come to our city with national campaigns. New York City, for example, has a $30 million national campaign in front of us right now. And by the way, it's very good. We wouldn't be able to pay for a $30 million campaign if it took us 10 years to save for it. And, you know, we have spent the last many years begging for our supper money every July. This will even the playing field. This will allow us to do things that the other competitors, other cities that we're competing with are able to do. You know, I tell you, Boston, if you've been around Boston in the past 5 days, you know, Fenway has kind of really made it back pre-pandemic. The cities were alive, everything was alive, people were happy, people were out and about, and it's exciting to what Boston is. You know, we've had our challenges in Boston, certainly, you know, we, as cities have. I think the Bureau is really working to diversify us, really working to put us out there as a city that is welcoming, you know, and you know, and I'm a hotelier, you know, we're optimistic by nature, but we have work to do as an industry, and we know that. And I think that these funds will allow us to get the word out and let people know what we know, what we all know, that Boston is not only a special city, but in our Commonwealth and in New England, we all know that all roads lead through Boston, right? We have guests checking into our hotels every day. By the way, I'm at the Lenox Hotel. We're also building the Raffles Hotel. It's a mixed use, 149 condos, 147 hotel rooms, almost next August. You know, we're fourth generation. We know what it's like to be in Boston, and you know, all roads lead through here. We have guests checking in and out, and they're going to the Cape, they're going to the Berkshires, they're going to, you know, Rhode Island, they're going to New Hampshire, they're traveling, they're spending money, and we need to get that back. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your leadership. I hope as you look through this, you start to have a confidence this is the right thing to do, and by the time we're done and the time you're done looking at this on the 18th, that you'll have our trust in knowing that we will do the right thing for your city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Gurki Singh. Thanks, Martha. My name is Gurki Singh. I'm the general manager of Westin Copley and W Boston. I represent these two hotels, which equate to 1,000+ guest rooms for Boston and employ close to 650 associates. As you know, with all successful organizations, our associates are our key and our biggest asset to success. And we are proud to employ a very diverse workforce, and most of who were immigrants like me. And for them, these hotels were their first jobs. 60% of my workforce is minority descent, and we offer this workforce a very well-paying job with full benefits, which has resulted in long longevity with their employment with us. I mean, at Weston Copley specifically, I have a lot of associates who've been with the hotel 25 to 30 years, and they're an extended family to us. Some of the councilors mentioned about these hospitality jobs being well-paying jobs. For our specific hotels, the average wage for our housekeepers, our cooks, stewards, is about $27 an hour. And we take pride in partnering with Local 26 and providing industry-leading and market-leading salaries and benefits to all our employees. You heard from Martha and Dan the impact to our industry. Our industry tends to, get hit the hardest when it comes to, the moment there's a recession or a downturn. But truly, the pandemic has been backbreaking for us. I mean, I don't think, at least in the 22 years I've been in the industry, could not have foreseen the closure of the hotels, which we went through in 2020, and then the gradual recovery. And talk about gradual. I mean, the only reason we were able to open my hotels I'm overseeing is through student housing and through extended stay nurses and non-traditional pieces of business. And then through Q1, even Q1 of this year, we were not even crossing a 10% occupancy threshold for a market which was kind of leading the industry at what, 80% occupancy. Dan mentioned it's great to see in the summer the Fenway concerts and all the crowds in the city, and we've definitely seen a recovery in the summer, which is awesome to see. We're seeing leisure travel, families. We're definitely seeing Boston come back to life. And that has helped, and that has put us back on the path of recovery. But we're still not seeing business travel. We're not seeing meetings, events, conventions. And a big part of it is international travel. Boston has become a gateway city, and international travel is just about non-existent when it comes to meetings. So, Martha precluded that, we are still going to be in a 3 to 4 year recovery period. For my hotels for this year, we will probably be ending the year at about 65% of 2019 revenue numbers. And we probably will not be back to 2019 levels till about 2024. And even as we recover from this pandemic, there's going to be other headwinds we are still going to be faced with. I mean, for specifically, where I'm located, we have the unknown with the Heinz Convention Center, which is something we're going to have to tackle further down the road. So, Boston, while will always be a great attraction for leisure travel, business and group is going to take a lot of work to get back into the cities. People are not back to the offices. We do not know what the new hybrid models or back to work models will look like. Some of our counterpart who we have contracts with in the city are saying that their workforce will probably be remote, and their occupancy in their offices will be down to about 30% prior to pandemic. So which is, again, less business travelers coming to the city to visit people in offices. So truly for us, I see a lot of upside and almost to a certain extent a silver bullet with the TDMD, allowing us to deploy funds, much needed funds, to create events, to create marketing, to deploy against other cities who are somewhat in the similar boat, and try to be able to get our fair share of business coming back to Boston, which allows all of us to be able to have a vibrant community and get back the hours we need for our associates. So that's from me, and I'll pass it back to Martha. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to next introduce our partner in many things from the Freedom Trail Foundation, Suzanne Segura Taylor. Suzanne.
Hi, thank you, Martha, and thank you, Councilors Edwards and Baker, and to Ed Flynn and Michael Flaherty and Mackenzie Bach for joining in today. It's nice to see everybody. Wish it was in person. My name is Suzanne Taylor, Segura Taylor, as Martha introduced me. Thank you, Martha, again. And thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I'm a Boston-born and longtime and current Boston resident. I've worked for the Boston Parks and Recreation Department for 14 years on partnerships, promoting our parks, and securing much-needed sponsorships and grants, as well as planning fundraisers, all to augment the department's budget to provide free programming to residents in every neighborhood. For the past 10 years, I've been working for the foundation, which promotes markets and helps preserve the Freedom Trail and the 16 official sites through visitor services, marketing, public relations, and education programs, including free in-school and now virtual programs for Boston Public Schools. And as you all know, as Boston is one of America's oldest cities and the birthplace of the Revolution, it's home to many nationally historically significant sites. There was a time of growth that threatened our sites, but Bostonians, thankfully, with their preservation efforts, saved other gems. The Freedom Trail was established in 1951 as a way for residents and visitors to know where to start and on what course to follow to visit the historic sites. At first, the city installed signage on corners pointing to the sites, and as of 1953, 40,000 visitors utilized the new wayfinding. And then in 1958, the city added the red line, and in 1972, it was extended into the Charlestown neighborhood, making the trail 2.5 miles long and include all the current 16 sites. The trail's iconic, we all know that. It's a unique collection of museums, burying grounds, churches, and more, and it attracts millions of people annually to Boston and the Commonwealth. And as Martha alluded to, is also helping and responsible for generating spending and helps create jobs in hospitality, tourism, and the education fields. The trail itself operates as a complex partnership of diverse public and private organizations. The sites are owned, funded, managed, and programmed by 6 nonprofit organizations. The City of Boston has 7 sites on the trail. The National Park Service has 1, the Commonwealth has 1, and the United States Navy has 1. And the foundation partners with all these entities and works very closely with many City of Boston departments, including Kate Davis's office, as well as with the GBCVB, the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism, Arts Boston, the Museum of African American History, Boston Bid, and more, to promote the trail, as well as Boston as a whole. The foundation operates on revenue from guided tours and other programming and receives little funding elsewhere. Due to the unique relationship that we have with the sites, that is a close one, the foundation's careful not to seek outside funding, as the historic sites require millions of dollars to maintain and preserve. Since the pandemic started, the foundation ceased conducting tours and hasn't resumed them yet. The historic sites, as well as other Boston area cultural assets, have also suffered, as you all know, due to the pandemic, with closures, limited capacity and visitation, necessary safety measures, and more. And to combat these losses and to help bolster visitation for Boston's 250th anniversary of the Revolution in 2025 and 26, as well as the 400th in 2030, the city and region will need to heavily invest now and in the future to market our great city as a destination not to miss, as we were all talking about. The foundation recently received a tourism recovery grant from the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism. It was a $20,000 grant, and it allowed us to create a new campaign which aligned with the city's all-inclusive and Be Local campaigns, as well as the Mass My Local campaign. And using pro bono work from an agency, we produce street signage and rack cards that are all over Boston, as well as a social media push. Without this grant, the foundation would not have been able to conduct this type of marketing, and funds are needed to effectively market our common assets. While too, the Commonwealth supports its regional tourism councils, as Martha had mentioned, it's as best as they can with their budget. The Tourism Destination Marketing District is a tool we need collectively to ensure that we have dollars to market our city. The new district, as Martha also mentioned, will be a partnership similar to the Downtown Boston Business Improvement District and Greenway District. And as we all know, the Boston Bid has been a great success in their efforts to enhance the district and improve experiences for all who live, work, visit, shop in the district. We've worked with the BID since its inception on marketing, programming, public safety, access, and more. And we're grateful to their ambassadors that are out on the streets every day, and they make the area clean and welcoming for both residents and visitors. And the new Greenway District will help their team maintain the Greenway to high standards, including the parcel the Freedom Trail traverses. So similarly to both BID's property owners, our friends in tourism industry, colleagues like Dan and Gingjay have agreed to create the Tourism Destination Marketing District. And these partnerships are invaluable and bring positive change and successes. The new district will be the same as we've all alluded to, and it will help attract residents and visitors to experience all Boston has to offer, not only the Freedom Trail, but everything, because there's so much. So on behalf of the foundation and the historic sites, please join me in my support of the district. Thank you again.
Thank you, Suzanne. And our final panelist today is Kathryn Peterson, our great partner in the arts. And Kathryn, we thank you for being here today.
Martha, it's my pleasure. Good afternoon, counselors. I'm Kathryn Peterson, Executive Director of Arts Boston, a nonprofit art service organization providing research, audience building programs, and networking for 165 theaters, music, dance, visual arts organizations, and festivals. These 165 cultural organizations have been devastated by the pandemic. Their earned income has basically come to a halt over the last 18 months with no in-person performances. And they've lost, just the nonprofit ones, they've lost over $376 million, with 30,000 cultural sector employees impacted by layoffs, furloughs, and cut hours. Like the tourism sector, the arts sector is currently looking at a 3 to 4 year recovery. It's great to see the shows packed at Fenway, but quite honestly, for the majority of producing arts organizations, it's a long ramp back to in-person performances. And while we know from our research that there's part of the public that's really eager to come back right now, there's also a significant part that's hesitating. And from our pre-Delta variant research, over 20% of audiences say they won't return until at least 2022. And that's pre-Delta variant rearing its head here in Massachusetts. So there are a lot of big question marks, but what we do know is that smart marketing and very smart coordinated communication makes a big difference to people feeling comfortable coming back. And we've seen that with the communication that's happened with the first indoor performances at the Calderwood Pavilion in the South End, and with Commonwealth Shakespeare's outdoor performances of The Tempest on the Boston Common. So we're particularly excited about the Convention and Visitors Bureau All-Inclusive campaign with its new narrative for Boston, giving a lift to all arts organizations. Yes, we know that the Museum of Fine Arts and the Boston Symphony Orchestra may be the headliners that most folks know about, but the texture of our community comes from our neighborhoods, from the festivals, from the after-school arts programs, from events like Nubian Nights, the BAMS Fest performances in Franklin Park, the programming at the Powell Arts Center, and our new cultural districts, Boston's Little Vietnam and the Latin Quarter. It's the blending of food, art, and people that makes Boston a place to visit multiple times and encourages Bostonians to venture beyond their own neighborhoods. We know that when tourists come, organizations like the Museum of African American History, the Huntington Theater, the Boston Gay Men's Chorus, the Strand, the Opera House, the ICA and the Seaport, Hibernian Hall, they all thrive, and so do the restaurants and the retail around them. We've talked a lot about the history and the role that that plays in attracting people to Boston. Well, the arts play a really critical role also. We're a $2 billion industry, and we attract over 4 times as many people going to live arts events every year as go to our 4 major arts teams. That's just to visualize what that means, because it sounds like a really abstract number. That's enough people in a year to fill Fenway Park more than 688 times. That's a lot of arts goers. And we know that tourists who come to attend the arts stay longer and they spend more. And the arts play a critical role in why businesses locate here, why employees want to move here. It's certainly not because of our great housing prices or the great year-round weather or the ease of the commute. It's because of the quality of life. And as our colleague Jim Rooney at the Chamber says, arts and culture and creativity are increasingly critical as the city competes globally for investment and talent. Councillor Edwards, I loved what you said about the concentration on this program being vibrant, responsive to the community, and creating jobs. And that's just what a really great ability to promote to visitors and to tourists about the great place that Boston and Cambridge are. But I think most importantly, it's about what the arts sector means as part of the fabric of our city. The arts are what makes a place a home. The arts tell the story of a region, and they give reason for people to live, work, and visit here. Boston has something for everyone. Anchor venues, resident companies, and contemporary artists making the city their canvas. So we at Arts Boston, with our 165 arts groups members, we stand in solidarity with our tourism partners at the Bureau in support of the creation of the Boston-Cambridge Tourism Destination Marketing District. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'll turn it back to you, Martha.
Kathryn, if I may say before Martha starts, that was amazing. If anybody had a doubt before you spoke, they shouldn't anymore. That was amazing. Thank you. So true.
Councillor Edwards, it's all yours. I'm done with our panel, and thank you for the time and listening to us today.
Thank you. What we're going to do now is a round of questions from councillors. I'll go with Councillor Baker, then Councillor Flynn, then Councillor Bach. And this will be, some of our questions will be directed at individuals, and some, Martha, might I suggest we can maybe direct them towards you, and you might know who of the team might be best to respond to that. Maybe that way for my colleagues on the Zoom. So questions can go to Martha, and she can kind of move them around to folks. So I just first wanted to say a couple things about why I'm excited and support this. In the conversations that I've had with the team that just spoke, what I thought was so wonderful about their responsiveness was really the whole district plan, which everyone does have this, the Boston Cambridge Tourism Destination Marketing District Plan. Every councillor has this in your inbox that breaks this down further about the goals and where the money goes. And this is for anybody who's watching on Zoom, this is formally part of the record. You could request a copy and you'll be provided with one. But being able to look and help to shape and mold based off of a lens from equity, things looking at the multilingual access points, that was something we were able to, there was never a push. I want to be very clear with folks. It was a yes, and. So that knowing that there was a multilingual, they were excited about it. Knowing that there was supplier diversity, very, very excited about that. Knowing that workforce development and being a place that's good for workers and good jobs. And I wanted to thank Gerke for bringing up Local 26, but in general, just making sure that people are paid more than a living wage to do really good work that is supporting the tourism industry. All of these things came up in previous conversations, and they're coming up now. I'm making sure everyone can see it in terms of transparency. This was I've been in a lot of conversations, negotiating with a lot of industry folks, whether it's developers, whether it's nonprofits, whether it's, in this case, the hospitality industry. And I have to say that this was not a back and forth on how a race to the bottom, which often it is with some business interests. This was how do we make it flourish? how do we make this really responsive? What would you want to do? Things like we thought about the trellis in the North End and how that's such a beautiful, beautiful landmark that people come to see from all around, and how this kind of funding can help enhance that and help us raise money, which we have to do every single year. Looking at the ways in which we have where the tall ships come in from around the country or around the world actually into East Boston, and how do we build an infrastructure around that really makes that a welcoming place, but also provides places for people to stay. This is what I'm seeing. There's a back and forth to help in terms of beautification. And also, for those of us who don't, myself, Councillor Flynn, and Councillor Bach all represent downtown neighborhoods. But I think one of the reasons why Councillor Baker is on here, and he'll speak for himself, is that the tourism industry needs to get beyond downtown Boston. It needs to get into the local neighborhoods. It needs to get into places that are not just on the waterfront. And that was a commitment you made, and that's a commitment you were committed to. And that's why those hotels, 70% of them that included not just waterfront, not just downtown hotels, also signed on to this because they're excited about bringing tourism and not just bringing workers to the hotels, but bringing a lot of the tourists to the hotels in other parts of Boston. So I'm very excited about that. And I just wanted to make sure, also one of the things that was a yes and was the ecotourism. As we're bringing more people in, we wanted to make sure that we could build infrastructure, more recycling bins, more places encouraging, use of different forms of straws and different forms of just different culture within the hotel industry, which I think people also need to know that having a TDMD is a way in which to collectively move on value statements, more diversity, for example, racial equity, for example. And also we believe in climate change, and we believe that the hotel industry can be helpful in helping to usher around different cultures and ways to be more green. So I do want to make sure that, again, I say no opposition has been filed. And I wanted to bring up the fact that I think Martha said this can be renewed every 5 years. And it could be that, and this is a question I have, that other cities are included in this in the future. So this isn't just forever for Boston and Cambridge. Could it be that other cities could be included so that if they're concerned about being left out, is there a way for the district map to change? That's my first question. My second question was just wanting to make sure you broke down the ROI conversation, Martha, where I understood that because there's already a tax being paid by the hotels for hospitality, that by actually having this additional fee, not a tax, but a self-assessed fee to help promote tourism, to bring more people into Boston, that there will be more revenue to then help pay on that other, on the tax revenue that goes into our general fund. So if you could speak to the map and its renewal, and if you could speak to the ROI for me, and then I'll turn it over to to Councillor Baker afterwards.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, ultimately, we can add as many cities or towns within our 45 city and town district into the TDMD, but we did recognize that because this was a new concept in Massachusetts, that trying to do too much at first might be a little bit of a challenge for us. And we knew that we already have a great partnership with Cambridge, and we felt like we wanted more than just Boston, because Cambridge is a huge asset for us as we market this area across the country and across the globe. We knew that that would be something that was doable, but we felt like adding too many towns at once would make it a little bit more of a challenge. And we're happy to say that the Cambridge partnership has worked out well. Their city council fully embraced this. They had a very lengthy hearing as well. So we're encouraged by that. And ultimately, we can add other cities after the first 5 year period to the mix, so that we could ultimately become a 45 city or town TDMD, which might be a first across the country, but definitely the door is always open for us. And I just want to add also the fact that we will have TDMD funds to market Boston and Cambridge specifically will free up some of our Mass Office of Tourism funds for some of the other 45 cities and towns that we represent, which for us, it's been very hard for us to, with the limited funds that we have, to fully represent our entire district. We do recognize that when Boston and Cambridge are successful, the rising tide floats all boats. So we have focused on that, sometimes at the expense of our friends and Quincy and Somerville and Everett. And we can use those state funds and some of our private funds now to bolster our efforts for the greater Boston area, which is very, very encouraging. So we're very happy about that. And I forgot your second question. I'm sorry.
It was specifically on the ROI.
Oh, yes, yes. So, yeah, these are typically designed, so any tourism promotion is typically designed to generate significant ROI. As I mentioned, in most cities across the country, the investment in tourism promotion comes from hotel tax dollars. And the concept is that if you take a portion of those hotel tax dollars and you reinvest them in tourism promotion, you will then generate more revenue for the hotel. So for us right now, as you mentioned, hotel tax revenue is down significantly in Boston, Cambridge, and across the Commonwealth. The more we invest in promotion, the more people will come. They will stay in a hotel. They will spend money in that hotel, and that hotel will collect and remit those hotel tax dollars. And beyond that, and perhaps even more importantly, we feel like the hotel stay is really just the start of the visit. It's an important piece, but no offense to Gerke and Dan, nobody comes to Boston just to stay in a hotel. We love you guys, but they come to Boston to do the Freedom Trail and to do what Kathryn promotes and to visit restaurants. And of course, there are taxes on meals and all sorts of other things that consumers take advantage of, retail, et cetera. So, that's where your ROI comes in. If you don't have anyone coming in, you're not collecting taxes. But if you can significantly increase the number of visitors, you will then, by default, significantly increase the amount of tax revenue. You're also increasing the number of employees in the industry. Of course, they have taxes associated with employment. So it really is a great snowball effect.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to turn it over to Councillor Baker. Councillor Baker may have some technical difficulties. I'll come back to Councillor Baker. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, and thank you to the panelists for outstanding presentations on this proposal. I know many of the panelists outlined the incredible workers we have in the city, especially immigrants, people of color, and they work in the hotel and restaurants and do an incredible job. They're almost the ambassadors of the city, the backbone of the city, in my opinion. So I'm looking forward to supporting this proposal. Many of the hotels are in my district. I'm very supportive of my hotels, of the restaurants. One question I have, and I don't mean to be argumentative here, but this is not, I'm going to support this, but also the hotels will not be cutting benefits over the years to make a profit. We're not going to be cutting benefits of workers to try to make a little bit of a profit during this tough time, or to fire workers also. I just want to get your commitment that we're going to work hard to keep everybody employed, especially our immigrant neighbors, communities of color. Because I'll be honest, I had a problem with the Copley Marriott when they fired workers, and I wasn't very happy about that. But I just don't want us to see, balancing the budget, the hotel budgets on the backs of our immigrant workers. So just wanted to ask a direct question, but also I hope to receive a direct answer also.
Excellent question.
On that question.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Flynn. So I can talk for the Western and W. Absolutely. At this point, the balancing of the budgets is almost like more so stopping of the bleeding. It's not an equation. And I open by saying our associates are our true asset, right? Talk about longevity of them being in our buildings and truly have built our buildings to be what they are today. So they are definitely a big part of it. I have a very good working relationship with Local 26, and you can reach out to Carlos for that as well. And we definitely have, while we've not had the hours given the fact we've not had the business. We have offered recall. We have negotiated with the Local 26 on all issues and tried our best to bring as many associates we can back to make sure they not only have wages but also benefits. So that is definitely a priority for us, and will continue being one.
And if I can piggyback on that, our employees, are our lifeline, right? They're our lifeline to, creating, the only way you create desire for a guest to return is through your employees. And, we all have beds, we all have nice showers, we all have nice rooms, but really it's our people that get people to come back to our hotels, as Martha Ruggie put it out, come back to our city first. And, over this pandemic, it's been torturous, right? We haven't seen them. Their families have been hurt, and a lot of the hotels individually have done different things to help along the way. We have a close relationship with Carlos at Local 26, and I promise you this: we're not about taking anything away from them. We're about helping them. Our housekeepers at most of our hotels are around $62,000. It's a livable wage, it's a good wage, and you know what? They're a necessary part, and we would never want to do anything to hurt that relationship. That Counselor, I promise you.
Thank you for those direct answers. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for being a good neighbor. Councilor Edwards, I have no further questions. Just want to say thank you to Councilor Edwards. Councilor Baker, I also want to say thank you to Councilor Edwards for working with the Cambridge City Council as well, and making relationships there, developing relationships there, and that's what happens in Cambridge, or what happens in Arlington, or what happens in Quincy, or what happens in other parts of the city or state impact the residents of Boston. So I want to say thank you to Councilor Edwards for taking the lead and taking the initiative of reaching out to our Cambridge, colleagues, and developing a positive working relationship with them as well. Thank you, Councilor Edwards, and thank you, Councilor Baker.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Counselor. First off, I want to just, Kathryn, thank you for mentioning Little Saigon and the Strand. They're two issues that are in my district, and also just the focus on going outside of the downtown core. I mean, in my district, I have a Frederick Law Olmsted Park. I have a presidential library. I have a replica of the Senate, burial grounds that date back to the 1600s. So that's music to my ears. And it's actually Little Saigon. We worked on that. We've been working on that for a couple of years. We finally got it approved this year. So thank you for all of that and just recognizing it. The Strand we're still in discussions. It's very much talking about how we revitalize that. There's different developments going on. So it's a really exciting time for both of those things. So I like the local option part. That's good news. The one question that I had, Martha, if you could maybe get into a little bit. First, one question is this assessment, is it going to be passed on 100% to the customers, or will the assessment somewhat be paid hotel and the customers? Can you explain that to me?
No, it will be passed on to the customer at 100%. And as I've mentioned, there's about 180 plus formations across the country of TIDs or TDMDs, and that is the case in each one of those jurisdictions. So it is passed on to the customer.
And what kind of money are we talking about here? Like on the high, like, so what is? And I apologize if you went through this in your presentation. So dollar amount coming into this fund, and then a second part of the question is, so what will the typical assessment be to someone staying in a mid-level hotel room?
Sure. So the budget will incrementally grow as our hotel occupancy and rate recovers. First year, we're looking at about 10.5 million collections from both the cities of hotels in the cities of Cambridge and Boston. And then as the occupancy and rate grows, we will grow. Ultimately, our goal is to get our budget up into the $30 million range, which is pretty much on par. Actually, maybe even still a little bit less than our competitive set across the country. But with our additional funding, that'll help supplement that. So, but I'm thinking that's probably a 5-year trajectory for us right now. And then as far as the guest goes, you know, a $300 room in Boston would be assessed at 1.5%. So you're talking about $4.50 for a checkup.
Thank you. And the 30 million would need to get back to a 2019 sort of levels. That will get us to the 30 million.
Yes.
Exciting. And there was one more question. So the bid that I'm working on down in Mass and Cass, that's a tax assessment that comes into our tax office and then gets dispersed to the people that run the bid. How is that going to work out? Like, so who will you pay who will the hotels pay the assessments to? Will it be Boston? Will it be Cambridge? Is it your commissioners that you had mentioned? Can you just give me a little bit on that?
Yep, the legislation is pretty specific in this area so that we have controls in place. The tax will be, the fee will be collected by just as the tax is, by the Mass Department of Revenue. So they'll collect it. So the hotels have an ease of transfer that they're already accustomed to. The only difference will be while they will remit monthly, we will only receive payment quarterly. So that, and we've already established a great relationship with the Department of Revenue. In fact, an important benchmark for us to meet is that they require notice 30 days in advance of the start of a collection period, and the collection period can only start on a quarter. So for us, that means October 1st would be the next eligible start to our collection period. So it's our hope that with your blessing today, or whatever you want to call it, we can get a vote before the full council by August 18th. So we can notify revenue that we have to also do a public notice for 14 days following the full city council meeting. And that would allow us to notify revenue before September 1st and start the collection process on October 1st. So there's a lot of last items in play, but that's how it works. And the legislation was pretty clear.
So the state will act as the collecting agent?
They will.
Okay. And I just think the opportunity, I'm seeing tourism commercials for every place, and we have to get off our back and get moving on this. And to just briefly, Kenzie had brought up about the 250th anniversary of the country, and this, we're gonna need to come up with some serious planning and promotion around that. And it will be hopefully be fully recovered by then in 2025. So I'm glad to lend my support. And thank you again, Councilor Edwards, for your leadership and all your work you've done on this and dragging me along with you. Thank you. Bye.
I didn't have to pull that hard, Councilor Baker. This is a wonderful partnership. Thank you. Councilor Bach?
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. And thanks, Councilor Baker, for mentioning that. Yeah, I was trying to get sesquicentennial off the ground, but I think we're going with 250th. But that will fall, I think, right inside of this period.
Sorry, I was screwed up on my math there. I meant 225, but I didn't know how to say the word like you just said it. So that was just a math error on my part.
Yeah, so, but I do hope that, with this in place, I think it will include the 5-year period will include that. So, thinking about ways to, in terms of signature big events, joining these things up, I think that would be awesome. I had a few in the weeds questions. So one is maybe a question for Kate Davis, but I noticed in the docs that Cambridge is taking a third of the Cambridge revenue directly to their Cambridge Office of Tourism, but it looks like we have foregone that approach in Boston. Can you speak a little bit to that on the city side?
I think I can take that, Kate, if you don't mind. It's the Cambridge Office of Tourism is actually a private entity. It's not part of the city of Cambridge. So they, in order for them to join forces, there's always I'm not sure how to word this. I think that they were concerned about being overshadowed by the city of Boston when this effort takes hold. So in order to gain their partnership, we wanted to give them assurances that they would have the opportunity to have some funds dedicated to solely promote Cambridge, particularly from a leisure perspective. And that would be funneled through the Cambridge Office of Tourism. So that's sort of how that ended up taking hold. The funds going to Cambridge are not the significant number of funds are going to be collected from Boston. Cambridge's collections are significantly lower than Boston. So, we're talking less than $1 million in the first year. And we already partner significantly with Kate and the city, as she knows. So I think there's an understanding between our office and Kate's office that there will definitely be further partnerships that will result from this.
Got it. Kate, did you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to say that, Mayor Janey supports this TDMD, and a lot of people have mentioned the collaborations we've had with them with the All-Inclusive campaign and the Be Local campaign. But I'd also like to highlight that during the pandemic, Martha created a space where we could disseminate information in an ever-changing public health crisis. It kind of created a bond among the whole hospitality community, including Cambridge. And I can attest to the important work they've done on behalf of the tourist industry in Boston and their commitment to our neighborhoods. I'm happy to speak more on our partnerships, but most of the things that we partnered on have been discussed here. So.
Great, thanks so much. And so, it looked like Martha from the calcs, since it's sending the Cambridge Office of Tourism a third of the Cambridge revenue, and it's projected for 3.3%, that it's about 10% of the collections that we expect to be from Cambridge versus 90% from Boston. That seemed like basically.
That does sound about right. Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of the 7% we're anticipating for admin and staff, what do you expect the staffing support for this to look like?
So that's specifically that fund is specifically related to the admin of the district itself, meaning,
right.
For instance, an executive director to manage checks and balances within the district. As far as staffing goes, most of the increase in staff will be on the bureau side once we've received the funds. And, we will obviously need to deploy individuals to make this happen and make the programs sing, if you will. So that's how that would work. It would also help offset things like legal fees, accounting fees, rent, and the like. So that, we're trying to keep the administrative costs as low as possible. And that's certainly just an estimate at this point, but those are the types of things that would cover.
Yeah, no, and I was just curious because there are all those things in the bucket, like, in terms of actual full-time equivalents, like, do you expect this to be a 1 ED? Do you expect this to be 3 people? Like, just so I have a sense of sort of how much of that 7% is sort of new FTEs versus the.
Yeah, initially, we're expecting 1 executive director to start with maybe a support person for the district itself. And then the additional expenses related to, as I said, the accounting, the legal fees, et cetera. Legal fees are going to be significant at the startup because we will have to form a new entity that will require bylaws being drafted, et cetera. So I think that number would likely decrease as time goes on. We've also invested at the Bureau a significant amount of money in this formation over the past 2 years. And We expect that the district would reimburse us for those funds as well in the first year, but we'll keep our eye on that administrative number and ensure that it doesn't grow too much. Our goal is to deploy as much of the money as possible into programming. And, I know that the steering committee that worked on this from the outset has been very committed to, obviously, the traditional sales and marketing program that we will deploy, but also to investing in that incentive and community fund that we talked about, which is allowing community events and programs to apply for funding, something that does not exist right now. For the most part, Kate does some of that, but obviously the city has limited funds. But in most cities, the Convention and Visitors Bureau does have the opportunity to fund large and small scale events, and we just don't. We fund small amounts to some events right now, but we don't have that opportunity right now. So that's a big commitment on behalf of the steering committee for the majority for a good percentage of the funds as well.
Got it. And can you talk to me a little bit about the district management committee? I mean, I noticed that just the 15 seats, and then there's 2 non-voting seats, and then there's 4 seats that sunset after 3 years. And I thought there's probably a story behind all of this. So just would love to understand a little bit, since obviously it always comes down to who decides, about what happens with money like this.
Right. Yeah, that was a discussion at the steering committee as well that we've had, and we agreed that I want to back up just a little bit here, because I want to talk about the petition process and how we manage that versus other TDMDs, and that will sort of inform how we decided on 15 seats at the management level. So when you form a TID or TDMD in our case, you have 3 options for your petition process. You can get, number one, you can get just by the number of rooms a hotel has. So you would have to get 62% of the rooms in the market to agree. You could do it by revenue, 62% of the revenue. So for example, if we were to go either one of those routes, we could have taken the large scale hotels in the Back Bay, and they could have formed this district without any other hotel agreeing to it in the petition process. We decided to go a little bit more of a challenging route because we wanted this to be as inclusive as possible. So we decided to do petitioning by one hotel, one vote. No wait. The Sheraton's vote at 1,100 rooms had the exact same amount of weight as 15 Beacon at 62 rooms. So it was definitely strategically decided upon by the steering committee that we wanted to have that democratic process in place. So now we have a lot of hotels very interested and invested in this process. And we recognize that in the formation stages, in the early stages, they're going to want to have a say, as many hotels as possible, in how the funds are initially deployed. And then we figured once the sort of the system was up and running and the engine was moving, we might be able to get away with fewer on the committee to make it more manageable. But it was sort of getting as many voices as possible into the initial plan implementation, understanding that in the long term, we may not need that many on the board to sustain it. I have a 55-member board at the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which ultimately oversees this whole thing at the end of the day as well. And I can assure you that less is better sometimes. So 15 will be a dream for me, but we'll take 12 as well.
And will all of those seats be held by lodging folks or
voting members? And myself will be the 15, and then we will have 2 at-large seats that will not be non-voting. It's the traditional governance structure for a TID that we've researched across the country.
Got it. And what type of entity or person is likely to fill the at-large seats?
It could be Kate. It could be Suzanne. It could be Kathryn. It will definitely be a non-hotelier. It could be a restaurateur. Someone from one of our attractions, et cetera. But on our steering committee, we did have several members of the steering committee that are not hotels. Because like I said earlier, we all recognize that the hotel isn't why people come to the city. it's everything else around that hotel. So we wanted to make sure that we were committed to promoting the destination as a whole, and that will carry through to the management committee as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have to confess, I've never gone anywhere for a hotel, although I've appreciated many of them. But although I think, yeah, my parents did their honeymoon at the Chateau Frontenac, and that might be the only.
Oh, that's a destination
where I
hotel
think
for sure.
was for the hotel. Can you speak a little bit about I saw and Councilor Edwards alluded to the back and forth and the sort of DEI module that the Convention Bureau is going to stand up kind of, and I saw that there's going to be consultation with our Chief of Equity, and so I'm just wondering what the kind of time frame on all of that is likely to look like.
Yeah, we're starting on that sooner rather than later. That program will be managed by our Executive Vice President, Helena Ajakaye, who is very active nationally with Destinations International and some of our partners who are already implementing these types of programs across the country. There's an entity called Tourism Diversity Matters that has a blueprint that we're going to follow, at least for the component related to getting more of our Black and Brown colleagues into the management ranks. And it's basically, it works around a mentoring process where we would form internships at the management level, in a hotel, at the CVB, at the convention center, educating potential college graduates in this industry and how they can become seasoned managers in the industry, and with a focus on recruiting more Black and Brown individuals. Our hotels are very committed to this. They recognize the deficiency there, but we'll also engage in other activities around that as well. Maybe working with Madison Park School to educate students early on before they even go to college on the benefits of being a part of the hospitality industry. So there are definitely many components to that we want to deploy against. And I think we'd be able to also generate some private sector support for that initiative as well, in addition to investing some of these funds in that effort.
No, I think that's great. And I think it's super important because, I mean, we all know that there are a huge number of high quality unionized jobs in this industry that are held by people of color in the city, but on the management side, it's still extremely white, which is also the story of a lot of our industries in the city of Boston. I guess one thing I'd encourage you to do is think about, because this is a collaboration of so many owners and management groups, whether there's an opportunity to create more of a cohort. Because I know one thing that I've heard from friends who are people of color who have sort of joined the management ranks of largely white management sort of communities is that it can be very, very lonely if they're the only person at a given hotel. And I think thinking about, is there an opportunity to create a peer cohort of support in this, as opposed to just saying yeah, wouldn't it be great for you to join this all-white management team?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because there are several communities across the country, cities, that are doing this, and they are sort of onesies and twosies. And Helena and I, in our conversations with some of the national entities that are helping us orchestrate this, said that's not going to work for us. We need change, and we need it to happen fast. So we're actually going to look at a model in Columbus, Ohio, where they are putting the program on steroids. And I believe that their first class is 30 people. Now, I'm not saying we can go that fast, 0 to 30 in a short period of time, but we absolutely recognize that we can't do this one at a time. It's gonna have to be, as you said, a group of individuals moving together, trusting each other, and infiltrating our industry in a really positive way.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And can we get in the doc, there's that Councilor Edwards filed, there's a reference to a few charts that I don't think we actually have. I think it's about the revenue breakdown between Boston and Cambridge.
It might be in that you did get after the letter.
Okay, yeah, I read through that whole packet.
Still no.
I don't know if I'm looking at the wrong one, but
I can get you, just if you let me know exactly what it is.
yeah, I think it's in section 5. I think in section 5, there's a reference, it's the budget structure section. The budget structure chart is there, but there's a reference. It says the first 2 charts represent isolated amounts for Boston and Cambridge, and the third demonstrates the aggregate total for the entire thing. I didn't see that. So if it's in a different
page, is it not this chart?
Yeah,
but that's the table of the budget, but it's not the chart that they're referring to of the aggregate.
I think it's the total is the third. At the bottom of that chart is the total. I can look into it. We have a lot of those broken down.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that what's described in prose there is not the table that is below the prose. So I think there's a reference to something. It would just be great to get it. It sounded like it was a projection of the aggregate totals coming from the 2 sides of the river.
Yeah, and we can just provide you with a current update on that anyway, based on hotel occupancy and rate that we're seeing in real time. So that might be even more helpful for you.
Great. And what's the existing framework, and forgive my ignorance, Martha, in terms of your outreach as the Visitors Bureau, and then what will it be like with this new district in terms of communicating with our Main Streets districts and entities like, in my district, we've got between the Beacon Hill Business Association and the Back Bay Association, a bunch of things that they're not technically Main Streets districts, but they do worry about the business environment in different places. And I'm just sort of curious how the connection and conversation with those groups will go.
Yeah, so the CVB will still retain the primary role in communicating with all of those entities that we already have relationships with, quite honestly, Back Bay and Main Streets districts, et cetera. When we developed all of our, those 3 videos that I highlighted in my presentation, we worked very closely with the Main Streets districts on those as well. So that will be the role of the CVB. Typically, the way this would work is the TDMD would not have a staff dedicated to the marketing and outreach. It would be them transferring funds to the CVB with the understanding that the CVB will execute on XYZ priorities with those funds. And certainly that will continue to be a priority for us. We have a very strong relationship with, Black Hospitality Coalition and all sorts of entities around the city that will only grow as we have more bandwidth actually to interact with them a little bit more frequently and strategically.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And I would love if we could talk at some point, about I am trying to think about this 250th and then also the 400th for the city in 2030. And there's no time like the present, as you guys know, to think about how to build up really successful large scale events and kind of like anniversary years. So would love to have that conversation with this group.
100%. We've been named to the 250th commission by the legislature. So we do have a seat on that, and be happy to engage with you at any time on events like that.
Great, fantastic. Well, very excited about this, and thanks for taking all my questions. And Councillor Edward, that's it for me.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to note that while this hearing was happening, we received another letter of support from Boston Public Market. So just letting us know that the support is actually growing for the TDMD. Also just wanted to explain the next process going forward after the hearing, just to work through what needs to be done and how it gets done. So after this hearing is actually legislatively prescribed. We were supposed to have this after the filing, within 60 days of the filing. So we're having the hearing today, a public hearing, after receiving the petitions at the city. The city council then must vote within 45 days of receipt of after this hearing. Then it's no more than, just to read the language, no more than 45 days after the close of the public hearing. The municipal governing body, in its sole discretion, may approve or disapprove the tourism destination marketing district by a majority vote. So in that case, the city council, the governing body, would approve this with a majority vote, which because there are 12 of us sitting on there, that would mean we need 7 votes. Upon such declaration, the Tourism Destination Marketing District may commence operations. So there's no, after that, after the city council approves it, it's over, and then they must commence their operations. So that means that they must mail and publish notice of the bid formation, and that must be published in a newspaper of general circulation, and for 2 weeks, with the last day of publication being not more than 14 days after the vote, to declare that the TDMD is formally organized. So that would be happening relatively soon. Then they would need to notify the revenue department within 48 hours of approval. And so it looks like, just based on the back of the envelope, with this vote, if it happens this August, then the mail and publish time formation would happen, I think, by the end of August or early September. And then we would notify the Department of Revenue no later than September 1st. And the tourism district may begin collecting assessment fees as early as October of this year. So just wanted to make sure everyone understood. We understand the urgency of the city of Boston, and we're excited to make sure that this process and this comes to fruition. I can say honestly, when we introduced it, majority of the colleagues are supportive of this on many levels. So, and we just received support so far. So I think that's it for us today. I don't think we have anyone signed up for public testimony. I will check. No. And so with that, the formal hearing today will end. And we will then set up and discuss when we will bring this before the governing body for a vote. Very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you enough for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you, Councilor.
All right. Thank you, Kate. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Hi, Kate. Thank you, counselors.
Hi, Kathryn. Long time no see.
How do you get this off?